You wake up, grab your phone before even getting out of bed, and in less than 2 minutes you've already seen 15 people living the life you wish you had. A former colleague posted photos from a trip to Thailand. An influencer shows her perfect morning routine with green smoothie, meditation, and ocean view. Someone announced a promotion at work that you wanted, and you're still in your pajamas staring at the ceiling, feeling that tightness in your chest you can't quite name. It's not exactly sadness. It's not anger. It's something deeper and more disturbing. The sensation that your entire life is behind schedule. That everyone discovered a secret you don't know. That no matter how hard you try, it will never be enough. You have a roof, food, a job, even some friends. But at the same time you feel an emptiness that grows with each notification, each infinite scroll, each automatic comparison your brain makes without asking permission. It's as if you're living in a race where the finish line moves away at the same speed you run. And the worst part is the guilt that comes after. You know you have privileges. You know there are those who suffer much more. So why does this emptiness persist? Why, having so much, do you feel so lost? Abraham Maslow spent decades studying what makes human beings feel truly fulfilled. And his most unsettling discovery wasn't about what we need to survive. It was about the invisible abyss between having your basic needs met and experiencing real fulfillment. He documented that most people never reach the upper levels of the hierarchy, not for lack of resources, but because something fundamental got lost along the way. And today, in the digital age, that abyss has transformed into an impossible canyon to cross. While our generation has unlimited access to information, global connections, and opportunities our grandparents never dreamed of, we feel emptier, more anxious, and more lost than any previous generation. Maslow predicted this paradox before the internet even existed, but he didn't imagine how technology would amplify each layer of unmet need, transforming legitimate searches for meaning into vicious cycles of external validation and destructive comparison. Today I'm going to show you how Maslow's hierarchy got distorted in the digital age, why you feel that fulfillment is further away than ever, and what really happens when we confuse instant dopamine with deep satisfaction. Maslow began developing his theory in the 1940s, observing not just patients in clinical settings, but extraordinary individuals who seemed to have cracked the code of human flourishing. He studied figures like Eleanor Roosevelt, Albert Einstein, and Abraham Lincoln, but also countless ordinary people who radiated a particular quality he called self-actualization. What fascinated him wasn't their achievements or their fame. It was something subtler. They seemed immune to the petty concerns that consumed most people. They weren't chasing approval. They weren't desperate to prove themselves. They had transcended the constant hunger for external validation that defines most human existence. But to understand how they got there, Maslow had to map the entire journey. And what he discovered was a hierarchy of needs so fundamental that it would reshape psychology forever. At the base were physiological needs: food, water, shelter, sleep, the body's non-negotiables. Then came safety, security, stability, freedom from fear. Third was belonging, love, connection, community. Fourth was esteem, respect, recognition, accomplishment. And at the peak was self-actualization, becoming everything you're capable of becoming, living aligned with your deepest values and purpose. The revolutionary insight wasn't just the levels themselves, but the progression. You can't genuinely pursue higher needs when lower ones are screaming for attention. A starving person doesn't contemplate their life purpose. Someone in constant physical danger doesn't worry about their creative potential. The hierarchy isn't a suggestion. It's a psychological law, as real as gravity. But here's what Maslow observed that remains devastatingly relevant today. Even when all lower needs are met, most people never ascend to self-actualization. They get stuck. They plateau. They have food, safety, friends, even career success, but they live with a persistent hollow feeling, a nagging sense that something essential is missing. He documented case after case of individuals who, by any objective measure, should feel fulfilled, but instead reported chronic dissatisfaction, anxiety about meaning, and a vague dread that they were wasting their one precious life. One particular subject stayed with him for years. a successful attorney in his late 30s who came to Maslow reporting what he called the Sunday evening feeling. Every Sunday, as the weekend ended, he felt a crushing weight in his chest, not just the normal reluctance to return to work, but genuine existential despair. He had graduated top of his class, made partner young, married well, owned a beautiful home. By every conventional metric, he had won. Yet he described his life as a very comfortable prison, where I'm both the guard and the inmate. Maslow spent months with this man, peeling back layers of conditioning, expectation, and fear, trying to understand what blocked him from the next level. What emerged was haunting. The attorney had built his entire life around needs that weren't actually his. He chose law because his father was a lawyer. He chose his specialty because it paid well. He chose his social circle because they reflected status. He had methodically satisfied every external marker of success while completely ignoring the quiet voice inside, asking what he actually wanted. He was stuck at level 4, esteem, endlessly collecting achievements and recognition, but never daring to ask the terrifying question that opens level 5. Who am I beyond what others think of me? This is where the digital age has weaponized Maslow's hierarchy in ways he never anticipated. That attorney in the 1950s dealt with limited comparison. His colleagues, his neighborhood, maybe the lifestyle magazines at the dentist's office. You deal with unlimited algorithmically optimized comparison every single day. Your phone is a fire hose of other people's highlight reels, carefully curated to trigger your insecurities. The technology isn't neutral. It's specifically designed to keep you engaged by manipulating your position on Maslow's hierarchy. Social media platforms have accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, built systems that trap you in level 3 and 4, belonging and esteem. Every feature is engineered around these needs. You post because you need belonging. You need to feel seen and connected. You refresh obsessively waiting for likes because you need esteem. You need validation that you matter. The apps have gamified human psychology, turning profound needs into addictive loops. And here's the devastating part. They provide just enough satisfaction to keep you hooked, but never enough to actually fulfill the need. You get the dopamine hit from a notification, the brief warmth from a comment, but minutes later the emptiness returns, even stronger than before. It's psychological junk food, designed to create hunger rather than satisfy it. Maslow observed that genuine belonging comes from deep, reciprocal relationships where you're fully known and accepted. Social media offers superficial connection where you're partially known and conditionally accepted based on what you perform. He noted that real esteem comes from authentic accomplishment and internalized self-respect. Social media offers borrowed esteem through external metrics that evaporate the moment you stop performing. You're stuck on a hedonic treadmill, running faster and faster, never actually moving forward on the hierarchy. Level 1, physiological needs, seems straightforward in the modern world. Most people reading this have reliable access to food and shelter. But even here, the digital age introduced unexpected distortions. Maslow emphasized that physiological needs include not just survival, but basic physical well-being, sleep, rest, bodily health. And what's happened? The average person now sleeps 90 minutes less per night than 50 years ago, largely due to screen time. You stay up scrolling, bathing your brain in blue light that suppresses melatonin, telling your body it's still daytime even at midnight. You sacrifice the most fundamental physiological need for the illusion of connection and the fear of missing out. Studies now show that chronic sleep deprivation has the same cognitive impact as being legally drunk. Yet it's become so normalized that admitting you got 8 hours of sleep almost feels like bragging. Your body is operating in a constant state of low-level emergency, which triggers something Maslow called regression. When higher needs aren't met or when you're under chronic stress, you regress down the hierarchy. Your brain, sensing that level 1 is compromised, redirects energy away from self-actualization concerns and back to survival mode. This is why exhaustion doesn't just make you tired, it makes you existentially numb. You stop caring about meaning and purpose because your nervous system is screaming that you're in danger. The digital age promised convenience and efficiency, but it delivered chronic stimulation and the erosion of basic rest, dragging millions of people down from wherever they were on the hierarchy back to scrambling at level 1. Level 2, safety needs, has been equally corrupted. Maslow defined safety broadly: physical security, financial stability, health, protection from harm, but also predictability and order. Humans need to feel that the world is generally stable and comprehensible. The internet shattered that. You live in a state of information overload where every day brings news of catastrophe, threat, and chaos. Climate crisis, political instability, economic uncertainty, global pandemics, mass shootings. And it's not just that these things exist. It's that you're exposed to all of them simultaneously, constantly, in graphic detail. Your nervous system evolved to handle local threats, dangers you could see and respond to. It didn't evolve for global ambient anxiety, for knowing about every terrible thing happening everywhere all the time. This creates what researchers call learned helplessness, the psychological state where you feel threatened but powerless to respond, which produces chronic anxiety and depression. Maslow observed that people stuck at level 2 become hypervigilant and controlling, desperately trying to impose order on chaos. Look around. The rise of conspiracy theories, the obsession with life hacks and productivity systems, the explosion of anxiety disorders. These aren't coincidental. They're symptoms of an entire generation trapped at level 2, trying to manufacture a sense of safety in a world that feels increasingly unstable and incomprehensible. And again, the digital platforms profit from this. Fear drives engagement. Outrage drives clicks. The algorithm learns that showing you content that makes you feel unsafe keeps you scrolling longer. So it feeds you an endless diet of threats, real and imagined, keeping you trapped in the second level of the hierarchy, too anxious to pursue belonging, too destabilized to think about purpose. Level 3, belonging and love, is perhaps where the digital age has done its most insidious damage. Humans are social primates. We evolved in small, tight-knit groups where everyone knew everyone, where belonging was physical and unconditional. You were part of the tribe simply by being born into it. Maslow studied how modern life disrupted this, how urbanization and mobility weakened traditional community structures, but he couldn't have imagined how thoroughly technology would atomize human connection. You now live in a paradox of being hyper-connected and profoundly lonely. You have hundreds of friends online and no one to call at 3 a.m. when you're falling apart. You share your life constantly and feel completely unseen. Maslow emphasized that true belonging requires vulnerability, the risk of being fully known. But social media incentivizes the opposite: curation over authenticity, performance over presence. You learn to package yourself into consumable content, to edit out anything that might be rejected, to present a version of yourself optimized for engagement rather than connection. And the cruelest part is that this strategy backfires. The validation you receive is for a persona, not for you. So it never fills the need. You can have a post go viral, thousands of likes, and still feel completely alone because deep down you know they don't actually know you. They know your content. Maslow documented that people deprived of genuine belonging often develop what he called false connection, relationships based on utility, transaction, or shared dysfunction rather than authentic intimacy. He would instantly recognize modern social networks as a mass production system for false connection, billions of people interacting constantly without actually meeting the need for belonging. One of Maslow's most profound case studies involved a woman in her early 40s who came to him suffering from what she called friendship exhaustion. She had an active social life, attended parties, hosted dinners, was known as a connector who brought people together. But she felt emptier with each gathering, more isolated despite being surrounded by people. Through their work together, she realized she had no actual friends, only acquaintances she performed for. She couldn't remember the last time she had a conversation where she wasn't managing her image, where she actually said what she thought and felt. She was stuck in a loop of providing entertainment and social value to others, while starving for reciprocal care. Maslow helped her understand that she'd been trading level 3, genuine belonging, for level 4, esteem and recognition. She had friends who admired her but didn't know her. The intervention required her to take a terrifying risk, Showing up to a close friend without the performance, without the wit and charm and hosting energy, just raw and honest about her loneliness. She described it as the most vulnerable thing I've ever done, admitting I wasn't okay to someone who only knew me as the strong one. The friend responded with matching vulnerability, sharing her own hidden struggles. For the first time in years, she experienced genuine connection, and she described it as physically different from her usual interactions, like suddenly breathing fully after years of shallow breaths. That story was from the 1950s. Imagine that woman today, with Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, with 1,000 more ways to perform and be admired, and 1,000 fewer opportunities for raw honesty. The digital age has scaled the problem she faced into a global epidemic. Level 4, esteem needs, include both external esteem, recognition and respect from others, and internal esteem, self-respect and confidence in your own worth. Maslow noted that healthy esteem development requires both, but emphasized that internal esteem is more stable and sustaining. External esteem is always conditional and fragile, dependent on maintaining others' approval. The goal is to internalize your worth, to develop what he called basic confidence that isn't shaken by criticism or failure. The internet has made this progression nearly impossible. Every platform is built around external metrics: followers, likes, shares, views, subscribers. Your worth becomes quantified and publicly displayed, and worse, the metrics are relative. You're not just measuring yourself, you're comparing your metrics to everyone else's. A post that gets 50 likes feels like success until you see someone else got 5,000. You got a promotion, but your college roommate made partner at a more prestigious firm. You're writing a book, but your critique partner just signed with a major publisher. The comparison is endless and algorithmically curated to show you people just successful enough to make you feel inadequate. Maslow warned that people who rely primarily on external esteem become fragile and performative, addicted to approval and devastated by criticism. He predicted that societies that overemphasize competition and status hierarchies would produce populations of anxious, insecure individuals who achieve external success while feeling internally fraudulent. He was describing the modern world with eerie precision. The digital age hasn't just continued this trend, it's turbocharged it, creating a generation that measures self-worth in real-time metrics, that experiences rejection and comparison constantly, that knows their value is being calculated and displayed for everyone to see. Maslow spent considerable time studying what he called the success trap, individuals who climbed to high levels of achievement but reported feeling empty and fraudulent. He interviewed doctors, executives, artists, professors, people who by conventional metrics had made it, and heard the same confession again and again. I feel like an imposter. I'm waiting for someone to discover I'm a fraud. Today we call this imposter syndrome, and studies suggest over 70% of people experience it at some point. But Maslow understood it not as a syndrome but as a symptom, evidence that achievement and recognition, level 4, cannot substitute for self-actualization. Level 5. You can collect every external marker of success and still feel hollow if you're not living in alignment with your authentic values and purpose. One particularly haunting case involved a surgeon who was objectively brilliant, respected internationally, saving lives regularly. By any measure, he should feel fulfilled. But he came to Maslow in crisis, confessing that he became a surgeon to please his father, not because he loved medicine. He was exceptional at something he never wanted to do. Every accolade felt like a reminder that he'd built the wrong life. The esteem he received from others couldn't compensate for his lack of internal alignment. Maslow helped him understand he was experiencing what modern psychology now calls values incongruence, the psychological damage of living against your own nature. The digital age amplifies this by making it easier than ever to chase metrics and recognition without ever asking why you're chasing them. You optimize your LinkedIn profile, grow your following, hit career milestones, but never pause to ask if any of it actually matters to you or if you're just doing what the algorithm rewards. Look, I know how heavy this feels. You're probably recognizing yourself in these patterns, seeing how you've been stuck at level 3 or 4, endlessly scrolling for connection or collecting achievements that don't satisfy. Maybe you're lying in bed right now, phone in hand, feeling that familiar emptiness despite being more connected and accomplished than ever before. Can you name the last time you felt genuinely fulfilled? Not just momentarily pleased by a like or a compliment, but deeply satisfied with who you're becoming? I know that question might sting. I know it might bring up feelings you've been pushing down. That quiet voice asking if this is really all there is. If this resonates with you, if you're recognizing that the digital age has hijacked your hierarchy of needs and you're ready to admit you feel stuck, leave a simple comment. I'm ready to climb higher. Your honesty might be exactly what someone else needs to read today to feel less alone in this struggle. You have more power to create connection and healing than you realize. And sometimes the first step toward level 5 is admitting you've been circling levels 3 and 4 for too long. Now here's where Maslow's work becomes genuinely revolutionary, and why understanding it might change your life. Level 5, self-actualization, isn't about achievement or recognition. It's not about becoming famous or rich or admired. It's about becoming fully yourself, about aligning your external life with your internal reality, about living with integrity and purpose. Maslow described self-actualized people as having certain unmistakable characteristics. They were reality-oriented, accepting things as they were rather than as they wished them to be. They were spontaneous and natural, less concerned with social performance. They were problem-focused rather than ego-focused, engaged with missions larger than themselves. They were autonomous, capable of solitude, not desperately dependent on others' approval. They had deep rather than shallow relationships, a few authentic connections rather than many superficial ones. They had frequent peak experiences, moments of profound meaning, beauty, or understanding. And critically, they were not perfect. They had flaws, failures, insecurities. But they weren't consumed by them. They had made peace with their humanity. Reading these descriptions today, they sound almost alien, like describing a species you've heard of but never encountered. How many people do you know who are genuinely autonomous, who aren't desperately seeking approval? How many are reality-oriented rather than lost in fantasy or avoidance? How many have frequent experiences of genuine meaning rather than constant distraction? The digital age hasn't just made self-actualization harder, it's made it almost invisible, a concept so foreign that most people under 30 have never even considered it as a possibility. Maslow identified several obstacles that prevent people from reaching self-actualization, and every single one has been amplified by technology. First, fear of one's own greatness, what he called the Jonah complex, the tendency to run from your own potential because fully becoming yourself requires risk and responsibility. The digital age has made this worse by providing infinite distraction and escape. Why face the terrifying question of your purpose when you can scroll endlessly, numbing yourself with other people's lives? Second, the pressure to conform, to meet others' expectations rather than discover your own. Social media has industrialized conformity, creating echo chambers where deviation from group norms results in immediate punishment, where authenticity is risky, and performance is rewarded. Third, past trauma and conditioning that convince you you're not worthy of fulfillment. The internet hasn't healed this. It's created new forms of comparison trauma, exposing you to thousands of people who seem to have it more together, reinforcing the belief that you're broken or behind. Fourth, lack of models. Difficulty finding examples of what self-actualization looks like. Maslow's subjects had mentors, communities, philosophical traditions that guided them. Today's young people have influencers selling courses and personal brands, performance artists pretending to have answers while being just as lost. The genuine role models, the quietly self-actualized people living with integrity, are invisible because they're not on the platforms, not competing for attention, not packaging their wisdom into monetizable content. But perhaps the most significant obstacle Maslow identified is what he called desacralization, the loss of reverence, mystery, and meaning in modern life. He observed that as societies become more technological and rational, they strip away the sacred, reducing everything to utility and measurement. Life becomes about optimization and efficiency rather than depth and meaning. The digital age has completed this process. Everything is data. Relationships are networks. Attention is currency. Meaning is content. You've been taught to quantify and optimize every aspect of existence, from your productivity to your sleep to your relationships, and in the process you've lost touch with what can't be measured. Beauty, awe, purpose, the quiet sense that your life has meaning beyond what it produces. Maslow studied people who had resisted this desacralization, who maintained a sense of wonder and reverence even in a secular age. They described experiences of transcendence, moments where they felt connected to something larger than themselves, whether that was nature, art, service to others, or spiritual practice. These weren't religious fanatics or naive romantics. They were scientists, artists, educators, activists, practical people who had simply refused to reduce life to mechanics. They protected space for mystery, and in doing so, they accessed level 5, where fulfillment isn't about getting something but about becoming something, about aligning with your deepest nature and purpose. One of Maslow's most illuminating cases involved a teacher in her 50s who came to him not because she was suffering, but because she wanted to understand why she felt so different from her peers. She described being content in a way that confused people. She wasn't wealthy, hadn't achieved fame, didn't have an impressive title. She taught middle school English in a working-class neighborhood, but she woke up most mornings with a sense of purpose and went to bed most nights feeling she'd contributed something meaningful. Her colleagues often seemed miserable, counting days until retirement, complaining about students and administration. She felt genuine joy in her work, even with all its frustrations. Through conversations with Maslow, she realized she'd accidentally stumbled into self-actualization by building her life around her values rather than external expectations. She taught because she genuinely believed in the transformative power of literature and language. She wasn't trying to be the best teacher or win awards. She was trying to open young minds to beauty and complexity. And when that happened, even occasionally, she felt aligned with her purpose. The recognition or lack of it didn't matter. She had internal validation, confidence that what she was doing mattered, regardless of who noticed. Maslow contrasted her with another teacher he studied, someone with a prestigious position at a university, published author, sought-after speaker. On paper, the second teacher had achieved far more. But he was miserable, constantly anxious about his reputation, devastated by criticism, unable to enjoy his accomplishments because he was always focused on the next achievement. The middle school teacher had found something he was still searching for: internal alignment, the sense that her external life matched her internal values. This is the paradox the digital age has created and the reason fulfillment feels harder than ever. You have more opportunities, more information, more connections than any generation in history. But you also have more distraction, more comparison, more ways to lose yourself in performance and external validation. The tools that promise to help you connect and achieve are the same tools that trap you in lower levels of the hierarchy, endlessly seeking belonging and esteem through means that can never truly satisfy those needs. Maslow would recognize immediately what's happened. Technology hasn't changed human nature or the hierarchy of needs. It simply made it easier to confuse artificial satisfaction for real fulfillment, to mistake dopamine hits for genuine meaning, to spend your entire life optimizing the wrong metrics while ignoring the quiet voice asking what you actually want, who you actually are, what you're actually here to do. The path to level 5 hasn't changed. It still requires the same things it did in the 1950s. Courage to know yourself honestly, willingness to live according to your values even when they differ from others' expectations, cultivation of deep rather than shallow relationships, regular engagement with experiences of meaning and beauty, acceptance of your humanity including your flaws and limitations. What's changed is that these practices now require actively resisting the dominant culture, choosing depth in an age of superficiality, choosing presence in an age of distraction, choosing authenticity in an age of performance. The solution isn't to abandon technology or romanticize the past. The digital age offers genuine gifts: access to knowledge, ability to find like-minded communities regardless of geography, platforms for creative expression, tools for organizing and activism. But using these tools wisely requires understanding what they're optimized for and what they're not. Social media is optimized for engagement, not fulfillment. It will always pull you toward comparison and performance because that's what drives usage. Your job is to use it intentionally rather than let it use you, to maintain boundaries that protect your attention and self-worth, to remember that the metrics are not measures of your value. Work is increasingly optimized for productivity and output, not meaning. You'll be rewarded for efficiency and achievement, but fulfillment requires asking whether what you're achieving actually matters to you, whether your work aligns with your values, whether you're building someone else's dream or your own. Relationships are increasingly mediated by technology, which is optimized for convenience and volume, not depth. True belonging requires the inefficiency of presence, the risk of vulnerability, the time investment of actually knowing and being known. You have to actively choose quality over quantity, depth over breadth, which means saying no to most opportunities for connection so you can say yes to the few that matter. Maslow believed that self-actualization wasn't reserved for a special few, but was the birthright of every human, the natural endpoint of development if lower needs are met and obstacles are removed. But he also knew it required intentionality, that the default path of following social expectations and chasing approval leads to level 4 at best, usually a comfortable stuckness at level 3. The digital age has made the default path even more seductive, wrapping the trap in dopamine and convenience and the illusion of progress. Breaking free requires something that feels almost impossible. You have to stop performing long enough to ask who you are beneath the performance. You have to risk the anxiety of stepping away from endless distraction to sit with the big questions. You have to prioritize depth in relationships even though it's slower and harder than collecting followers. You have to define success internally rather than accept the external definitions the algorithm feeds you. You have to reclaim your attention from platforms designed to capture it. You have to reintroduce sacredness into a life that's been fully optimized and measured. None of this is easy. All of it is countercultural. But the alternative is spending your one precious life stuck at levels 3 and 4, endlessly seeking connection and validation through means that can never provide them, slowly dying of thirst while holding an empty cup under a waterfall of content. The most hopeful thing Maslow discovered is that movement up the hierarchy is always possible. People aren't fixed at a certain level. With awareness and effort, you can progress. And interestingly, the very suffering that comes from being stuck can be the catalyst for growth. That persistent emptiness you feel isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's your psyche telling you that what you're doing isn't working, that likes and followers and achievements aren't feeding your actual hunger. The Sunday evening dread, the comparison spirals, the sense that everyone else figured out a secret you missed. These aren't signs you're broken. They're signs you're ready for level 5. That your soul is demanding something more substantial than what levels 3 and 4 can provide. The teacher who found fulfillment wasn't smarter or luckier than her miserable colleague. She just listened to that voice instead of drowning it out. She asked the hard questions. What do I actually care about? What gives my life meaning beyond how I'm perceived? What would I do even if no one noticed or applauded? And then she had the courage to build a life around her answers. Even though the answers didn't lead to conventional success, even though they didn't optimize for recognition or wealth or status. Maslow found that self-actualized people shared this quality. They had consulted their internal compass, rather than just following the well-worn path. They had prioritized being over-seeming, alignment over achievement, depth over display. If you're recognizing yourself in this struggle, if you're seeing how the digital age has kept you running on a treadmill of belonging and esteem, while genuine fulfillment remains out of reach, you're not alone. An entire generation is waking up to this reality, realizing that the promise of technology has been inverted, that the tools meant to connect and empower have often isolated and diminished. But awareness is the first step. Understanding Maslow's hierarchy gives you a framework for diagnosing where you're stuck and what you actually need. If you're anxious and hypervigilant, you might be stuck at level 2, needing to rebuild a sense of safety through boundaries, routine, and limiting information intake. If you're lonely despite hundreds of connections, you're stuck at level 3, needing to invest in a few deep relationships rather than many shallow ones. If you're accomplished but empty, you're stuck at level 4, needing to shift from external validation to internal alignment. And if you're asking bigger questions about meaning and purpose, feeling that pull toward something more. You're ready for level 5. Ready to risk becoming yourself rather than continuing to perform a version optimized for others' approval. The hierarchy isn't a rigid ladder you climb once. It's a dynamic system you move through. Stress and crisis can push you down. Growth and healing pull you up. The digital age has created systemic pressures that push most people down and keep them there. Your task is to recognize those pressures and actively resist them, to build practices and relationships and rhythms that support upward movement, to remember that fulfillment isn't something you achieve or acquire, but something you become through alignment with your deepest self. This journey isn't something you have to take alone, and honestly, you shouldn't try to. The work of understanding your place on Maslow's hierarchy, recognizing how the digital age has distorted your needs, and finding your path to genuine fulfillment, it's ongoing. It requires support, perspective, and regular reminders that you're not crazy for wanting more than what the algorithm offers. If this conversation resonated with you, if you felt seen in ways you haven't in a long time, I want to invite you to continue discovering alongside others who are asking the same questions. This isn't about adding another thing to your endless content consumption. It's about finding a space that actually supports your growth, rather than extracting your attention. When you join this community by subscribing, you're not just getting more videos. You're connecting with a shared commitment to depth over distraction, to becoming over-performing, to the hard and worthwhile work of actually living rather than just existing. We'll explore the rest of Maslow's hierarchy in detail, unpack the specific practices that support movement toward self-actualization, and examine other thinkers and frameworks that illuminate the path. More than that, you'll find yourself in a community of people who value the same things you do, who understand that the metrics don't measure what matters, who are brave enough to ask the big questions even when the answers require change. Hit the subscribe button not as another passive click, but as a commitment to your own growth, as a declaration that you're ready to climb higher on the hierarchy, that you refuse to stay stuck in digital age distortions of your genuine needs. I'll be here creating content that serves your actual growth, not just your engagement. Let's walk this path together. Next, we'll dive deep into what Maslow called peak experiences, those moments of transcendence and profound meaning that characterize self-actualized lives, and explore how to cultivate them intentionally even in a world designed to keep you distracted and numb. Until then, remember that the emptiness you feel isn't evidence that something's wrong with you. It's evidence that you're ready for something more, that your psyche refuses to settle for artificial satisfaction. Honor that knowing. Trust that hunger. It's leading you home to yourself.